The war just ended, and then it immediately started again, less than 24 hours. That is how long the ceasefire lasted before collapsing into the deadliest single day Lebanon has seen in this entire conflict. I am Michael Turner, and what happened in the hours after Trump announced peace with Iran is the most revealing thing that has happened in this entire 41-day war. More revealing than any missile strike, more revealing than any ultimatum, because it shows you exactly who is actually in control of this conflict, what the ceasefire actually covers, and why the Islamabad peace talks that are supposed to begin might never happen at all. Let me take you through the sequence, because the timing matters enormously. At 6:17 in the evening, hours before his own 8 p.m. deadline, Trump posted the ceasefire announcement on Truth Social. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. Simple, clean, suddenly, no buildup, no advance warning. Just a statement that ended 40 days of the most intensive American bombing campaign since Iraq in 2003. Iran accepted. Foreign Minister Araghchi announced that safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz would be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces. Not unconditional, not free, coordinated, but open. Ships could move. The world reacted immediately, and the reaction was extraordinary. Oil prices dropped below $100 per barrel for the first time in weeks. Dubai's stock market jumped 8.5%, its single biggest daily gain in over a decade. Tokyo's Nikkei rose more than 5%. Seoul jumped nearly 7%. Markets across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East surged simultaneously because the alternative of Trump actually following through on Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, of 85 power plants destroyed in a single night, of bridges collapsed across the country, of 88 million Iranians without electricity and clean water, that alternative had been avoided. Even a complicated, messy, contested ceasefire is better than that. And markets priced in relief instantly. Leaders around the world praised the deal. The German Chancellor, the British Prime Minister, the French President, the UN Secretary General, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who issued a statement welcoming the ceasefire and calling it a step toward peace. For a few hours, it genuinely seemed like 41 days of war. More than 2,000 Iranian deaths, 1,400 Lebanese deaths, 13 American soldiers killed, a global oil shock that cost ordinary families hundreds of dollars in higher gas prices. It seemed like all of that was finally over. And then Israel struck Lebanon. Early Wednesday morning, hours after the ceasefire announcement, the Israeli Air Force launched what its own military described as the largest single attack on Lebanon since its ground operation in Lebanon began. Not a small operation, not a limited strike, the largest attack of the entire war. Against Lebanon, the day after the ceasefire, hundreds of airstrikes across the country. Beirut hit, southern Lebanon devastated, the Bekaa Valley struck, Hezbollah command centers, weapons depots, and missile launch sites targeted, but also residential buildings, also civilian infrastructure, also neighborhoods where families were sleeping who had nothing to do with Hezbollah's command structure. Lebanon's health ministry confirmed at least 200 people killed and more than 1,000 wounded in a single day. Wednesday became the deadliest day for Lebanon in this entire conflict, and it happened within hours of a ceasefire that the entire world had just celebrated. The United Nations Human Rights Chief issued a statement that used a specific word: carnage. Quote, "Such carnage within hours of agreeing to a ceasefire with Iran defies belief. That is not diplomatic language. That is the UN's top human rights official expressing something close to moral shock." Israel's response was immediate and has not changed since. Defense Minister Katz issued a statement: Israel supports the U.S.-Iran ceasefire, but Lebanon is a separate issue. Hezbollah is a separate threat. Israel will continue to defend itself. We will continue to strike Hezbollah targets. Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel welcomes peace between the United States and Iran, But Israel's security is non-negotiable. Hezbollah must be dismantled. Lebanon must be secured. And Israel will do whatever is necessary, even if it means continuing the war while the United States and Iran are at peace. This is the loophole, the gap that was built into the ceasefire agreement, whether intentionally or through negligence, that is now threatening to destroy the entire deal before it has a chance to function. The agreement Trump reached with Iran is bilateral, United States and Iran. It requires American forces to halt all offensive operations in Iran, and it requires Iran to halt its missile and drone attacks on American targets and American allies. But it says nothing about Israel. It says nothing about Hezbollah. It says nothing about Lebanon. And Israel is exploiting that gap with 200 dead in a single day. Now, here is what I want you to understand about why this ambiguity existed in the first place. Because this was almost certainly not an accident. Getting Israel to agree to halt all operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon would have been extraordinarily difficult. Israel sees Hezbollah as an existential threat. Israel has been planning and preparing for a decisive military operation against Hezbollah for years. And the moment the United States announced it was negotiating with Iran, Israel saw a window to degrade Hezbollah as much as possible before any permanent peace framework constrained Israeli military options. The ceasefire was therefore crafted in a way that allowed Trump to claim he ended the U.S.-Iran war while leaving the Lebanon question deliberately unresolved. Because resolving it would have required getting Israel's agreement, and Israel was not going to agree. But Iran interpreted the ceasefire differently. Iran assumed that a ceasefire meant all parties stop fighting. Iran assumed that American allies covered by American weapons and American intelligence support were implicitly bound by any agreement the United States made. Iran assumed that if the U.S. agreed to peace, its closest ally in the region would honor the spirit of that peace. And instead, Iran woke up to 200 dead Lebanese in a single day. Iranian officials responded with fury. They accused the United States of violating the ceasefire, said that American weapons are being used in Lebanon, said American intelligence is supporting the strikes, said American political cover is enabling the attacks, and said that if Israel, acting with full American support, can bomb Lebanon the day after a ceasefire, then Iran has no obligation to honor that ceasefire either. Reports emerged that Iran was considering pulling out of the deal entirely. Iranian news agencies reported that tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz had been suspended again. Ships that had just started moving through the strait for the first time in 40 days were reportedly told to stop. The White House denied this. Press Secretary Leavitt said reports of Hormuz closing were false, said ships are still moving, said Iran is honoring the agreement. But Iranian state media contradicted that, and maritime tracking services showed deeply conflicting data. Some ships moving, some stopped. Confusion across the entire maritime sector that depends on that waterway. Pakistan, the country that brokered this deal, is scrambling. Foreign Minister Dar called for urgent de-escalation and specifically stated that Lebanon must be included in the ceasefire. The European Union's foreign affairs chief said the same thing, called Israel's strikes deeply damaging, said the ceasefire must cover Lebanon, said Israeli actions are putting the U.S.-Iran agreement under severe strain. But Israel refuses, and the United States is backing Israel. The White House National Security Advisor issued a statement saying the ceasefire is between the United States and Iran, said Israel has legitimate security concerns, said the U.S. supports Israel's right to defend itself against Hezbollah. From Iran's perspective, this is the United States agreeing to peace with one hand and enabling war with the other. And that perception is not unreasonable. The bombs falling on Lebanon are American-made. The aircraft dropping them were purchased with American military aid. The intelligence supporting the targeting came from systems the United States provided. The political protection in every international forum comes from American veto power at the UN Security Council. So when Israel bombs Lebanon the day after a U.S.-Iran ceasefire, from Iran's perspective, that is the United States bombing Lebanon. The flag on the aircraft is the only thing that is different. This is the crisis that is now threatening the Islamabad talks. Those talks are supposed to begin on Friday. American and Iranian delegations, 2 weeks to finalize a permanent peace deal, address the Strait of Hormuz permanently, address Iran's nuclear program, address sanctions, address American military presence in the region, address compensation for war damages. All of it supposed to be resolved over 14 days in Pakistan's capital, but Iran is threatening not to show up, is saying that it will not negotiate while Israel is bombing Lebanon with American weapons and American support, is demanding that Lebanon be covered by the ceasefire before Iranian negotiators board planes to Islamabad, and the United States position, as stated by the White House, is that the ceasefire does not cover Lebanon, that Israel's operations are separate, and that Iran should honor the agreement regardless of what Israel does. Those two positions are incompatible, and unless something changes in the next 48 hours, the Islamabad talks might not happen. And if the talks do not happen, the 2-week ceasefire expires with no permanent deal in place. And then the question becomes whether Trump extends the ceasefire or resumes bombing. And Trump's credibility on ultimatums and deadlines has already been tested repeatedly in this war. Now, let me tell you what is actually working within this fragile and contested ceasefire. Because there is something real happening, even in the middle of the chaos. U.S. forces have halted all offensive operations in Iran. That is a significant and concrete change. For 40 days, American and Israeli aircraft bombed Iran every single day. That has stopped, not because Iran surrendered, not because Iran was defeated, but because a deal was reached. And American pilots are not flying strike missions over Iranian cities tonight. At least 2 ships moved through the Strait of Hormuz on Wednesday, according to maritime tracking services. The first ships to transit the strait since it was closed on the day this war began. Even if the situation is uncertain, even if Iran is threatening to close it again, the fact that ships moved through, even briefly, is a demonstration that both sides have some interest in the deal functioning. And Defense Secretary Hegseth revealed something in his press conference that tells you a great deal about the military reality Iran faced. He said Iran was obsessed throughout this war with trying to strike the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, launched hundreds of missiles and one-way attack drones directly targeting the carrier. Every single one was intercepted. Every single one stopped miles from the ship. Iran committed enormous resources and effort to sinking an American aircraft carrier and failed completely. That military reality, Iran's inability to hit the target it most wanted to hit, is part of what pushed Tehran toward accepting the ceasefire. A government that believed it was winning militarily would not have accepted Pakistan's 10-point proposal 90 minutes before Trump's deadline. But here is what makes this moment so dangerous. The ceasefire is real enough that markets believe in it, that oil prices have dropped, that stocks have surged, that the global economy is pricing in relief. But it is fragile enough that a single Israeli airstrike the day after it was announced killed 200 people and is now threatening to collapse the entire diplomatic architecture before it produces a permanent agreement. The people of Lebanon are trapped in that gap. The 200 dead on Wednesday were not a military calculation. They were not a strategic necessity. They were the cost of an ambiguity in a diplomatic agreement, a loophole that allowed one party to continue bombing while every other party celebrated peace. And the parties that celebrated are now being asked to choose. Does the ceasefire expand to cover Lebanon, or does it not? Does the United States pressure its closest ally in the region to halt operations, knowing that doing so requires Israel to abandon military objectives it has been pursuing for months? Or does the United States accept that the ceasefire is what it is, bilateral, limited, incomplete, and hope that Iran accepts that reality too? Iran is not accepting it. Not yet. Not quietly. And the clock is ticking toward Friday. I am Michael Turner. Subscribe and turn on notifications right now because this is the most fragile and most consequential 48 hours of this entire war. The Islamabad talks either start on Friday and give this ceasefire a chance to become something permanent, or they collapse before they begin, and we find out very quickly whether Trump's threat to bomb power plants was a real policy or a bluff that has already served its purpose. Tell me in the comments, will the ceasefire survive the Lebanon question, or is Israel's refusal to stop operations the issue that kills this deal before Islamabad even begins? And do you think Trump will pressure Netanyahu to halt operations in Lebanon, or will he back Israel regardless of the cost to the ceasefire? I will see you in the next update.